Hello, welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda, and today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up. This is a little late. It is November 7th. Fun fact, I was originally supposed to be married today. 2020 has been a journey. But we're here because we want to be safe, and we want to be healthy, and we want to protect our loved ones, and we want to protect the people that our loved ones see. So we're here. We're here today, and we're going to talk about books. So let's dive in. I've read 9 books in October. Whoa, what? Girl, what were you doing? I was procrastinating, so I decided to read. So that's what happened. So the first book that I finished, and so maybe 2 of the books probably don't technically count because I think I started reading Heads of the Colored People in September, but I finished it in October. Yes, so the first book is Heads of the Colored People by Natasha Thompson Spires, and this was a collection of short stories, and all the stories were about like the Black experience and more in depth about the Black like middle class experience. And I really enjoyed these. I thought these were very poignant and like very like kind of like a deep dive and like very like you got to see a lot of like what the character was thinking in their head. Like there wasn't a lot of dialogue. It was just mainly like thoughts and feelings of the characters in the story. And so that was just really fascinating to me. I listened to this as an audiobook, which I don't know if I would recommend because for me, it kind of felt really hard to kind of know when we were going into the next story. It wasn't really announced. It wasn't really like said, I guess. And so I felt like very confused when we were in the next story. I felt lost for a bit, but we made our way back. Probably one of my favorite stories in the book, and I was just looking at Goodreads, and I think this is probably an overwhelmingly popular one, is there's instance where there's 2 Black mothers who are writing letters back and forth to each other, and they both have daughters in this private school, and their daughters are the only 2 Black girls, and the 2 mothers both have PhDs, and there's just this exchange of letters of how their daughters are not getting along, and kind of putting each other's daughters down and putting each other's careers down, putting each other just in general down. And this heated exchange that started with like a playground fight between their 2 daughters. I don't even remember how it started, but it's almost just so fascinating to see that exchange and just so not funny, but like just interesting to see it go back and forth, back and forth. That was just one of my favorite stories to read. It was really well done. So the next book I read was How We Fight for Our Lives by Sahi Jones, and this is Sahi Jones' memoir, and it is about how he, as a Black gay man, grew up in the South, and his experiences going to college and then growing up as an adult. And I just thought this was really, really, really good. I gave this an overwhelmingly 5 stars. I thought that Sahi Jones did such a wonderful job. I was literally bawling my eyes out at certain parts, like just crying. And it's also a fairly like short book, so I just think I read it within a day or 2. It was just so good. I loved how Sahi Jones kept talking about the relationship he had with his mom. His mom was a single mom, and she was working a lot of hours to try to support both of them, but they had a pretty close relationship. And I think one of the most devastating parts of the memoir was how he got into NYU, and he wanted to go to New York so bad, but his mom just didn't have money to send him there, and both of them were devastated, like her being like she couldn't give this to her son, and then him being like, I want to go so bad, but I also feel so incredibly bad putting that expectation on my mother. But he ends up going to a university in Kentucky. So it's almost, it was interesting to hear his perspective on how he really wanted to get out of the South, but he ends up going to Kentucky for university. And it was just an interesting transition to see him go through. And I don't know, the stories are just so beautifully written and honest and completely raw, completely raw. He's not holding back, and I just really enjoyed reading it. And if you have not read How We Fight for Our Lives by Sahi Jones, I highly recommend getting it on your TBR now, putting it on there, reading it tomorrow, today. Go read it. It's so good. Okay, so the next book I read was A River of Stars by Vanessa Hu. And this is a book I've had on my TBR for a while. So finally got around to it. And I really enjoyed this book. My only complaint would be that I thought it kind of dragged at the end. And I don't know if that's, again, I read this as an audiobook, so I don't know if that's more of the reason why, but... So A River of Stars is about our main character, and she originally is from China, and she works at this factory. She's a manager. Like, she kind of runs her show. She's a boss. But her boss and her are in a romantic relationship, and he is married with, I think, 2 adult children. So that are probably the same age as her, to be honest. I can't remember what their age difference was, but there was one. Our character, whose name is escaping me, she gets pregnant. It's kind of like this weird time, but when she goes to the doctor, she finds out that she's having a boy. And her, I'll just call her boyfriend, has 2 daughters. And so he desperately wants a son. And he wants his son to be an American, because he just thinks it would bring so much, like, you know, opportunities and wealth and yada, yada, yada. Because bear in mind, the man that she's having this affair with owns, like, a plethora of factories. He's very well off. He's good. It's not like he's sending his son to America for this, like, better life. He just wants his son to have this better foothold in the world, like more business opportunities, whatnot. So he sends his mistress, our main character, to America, where there's this, like, facility, but, like, spa, they call it, for pregnant women. It's mainly, like, it's literally set up for Chinese women to come over and have their babies in America. And so she's at this facility, and it's just, it's not great. She doesn't love it there. The women are catty. They look down to her, at her, because she's a mistress, so she's, like, lower than all of them. And she's just, like, in her corner, like, this sucks. I don't enjoy this. Get me the hell out of here. The food sucks. And then, like, her boyfriend keeps telling her that she can't eat certain food, and she's getting really sick of him bossing her around. She has a doctor's appointment. Goes. And the doctor is like, oh my gosh, are you so excited for your little girl? And she's like, wait, what? No. And so she finds out that she's having a girl and not a boy. And that changes a lot of stuff. So she ends up escaping this facility with one of the other residents there, who is, like, a teenager. I can't remember how exactly old she is, like 17, 18. So both of them escape together, and kind of, they start this, like, life on the run kind of together, and they end up settling somewhere and kind of making a life, but also, like, just on guard constantly. At least our main character is. And it was really just really interesting to see how we see our character going from being, like, pampered, having everything provided to her, to she, like, literally cannot, like, she's living in an apartment. She's, like, trading things throughout her community to get rent for the month. It's, like, just this amazing story of survival, and, like, I don't know, with, like, motherly instinct kicks in. Like, you just know you have to keep pushing for this person inside of you and the person that's going to come out eventually, and you just keep grinding. But she definitely just is a hustler, and it was fascinating to watch their story unfold. But the part that I think just dragged a bit was, like, the end, where I just felt like we kept hearing the same things over and over again for a while, and I was just kind of like, yep, I get it, we're here, what's happening next? That was kind of, like, a bit to get through, but, you know, we get to the end, and it's enjoyable. I really enjoyed this book. 4 stars. So the next book I read was Behold the Dreamers by Imbolo Imbu, and this is a book that I read for my book club that we actually had yesterday, and me and one other person were the only ones who read the book, so not much to talk about. I really enjoyed this book. This is another example of a book I think dragged a bit, and I actually read the physical book. I just thought it dragged a bit at the end, and I just felt like the characters were going in this, like, same circular motion, like they were stuck almost, and then finally got themselves spit out. So some background: the story is about John Day and his family. coming from Cameroon to create a better life for themselves. And it's this like very interesting novel because we start with John Day and his family in New York together, searching for a job, but he has actually already been in the US for like 3 or 5 years by himself, just trying to save enough money to have his wife and son come over. And that just kind of was like, whoa, this seems like such a long time to go without a support system. Like he lived with other, I don't know if there was other immigrants or just other people that, you know, in like a very tiny apartment in New York. And it was just, I don't know, crazy to kind of hear. So his family's here, they're in New York, and it's actually 2008. So that was actually one of my favorite parts about this book, was learning about the 2008 financial crisis in this fictional story, because I really honestly don't know a ton about 2008 and the situation that happened. And I feel like I'm not exposed to a lot of literature or books about it. And so that was really cool to read. I felt like where I was when I was a child in middle school or something during 2008, I don't remember anyone around me being affected. So obviously there was so many people in the United States affected by 2008. Clearly, it was, you know, an economic crisis. So something happened. So it's really interesting to hear these stories of people during this time. Okay, I digress. Anyways, so John Day is in America. He's looking for a job. He ends up being a chauffeur for this white businessman, and he works on Wall Street. I loved this part of the book where we hear, you know, John Day is this chauffeur. He drives this man around, and we hear like these snippets of stories from this white man's life. And it just was really fascinating to see how their two lives really connected, and you wouldn't think like they would, but they really do. I mean, this person drives you and your entire family around. Like he was driving his wife around, he was driving his 2 sons around. So you get this whole like picture of this family. And then eventually John Day's wife goes, and she is, you know, a maid slash, not really a nanny, but she's mainly just like a maid and cook for the family over the summer in their summer home. And she, you know, finds out even more about this family, they're connected, and they like have this like bond with each other. And once the crash happens, the story kind of takes a different turn. It's definitely less like, oh, like, you know, there's this connection between these 2 families, yada yada yada. You know, I don't want to give too much away about the story. I'm trying to look at Goodreads and see what the synopsis is. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this then. But yeah, so 2008, the crash happens. John Day and his family are just desperate to keep a job, desperate to keep this job, to do anything for this job. And we start to see not just like major cracks in the family that they work for, even before the crash happens, like definitely some like, whoa, stuff happening. But then we also start to see a lot of like cracks happening in John Day and his family's life, and just how, you know, this thing affects everyone and everyone around it. And so just a really, really interesting book. We got to hear from John Day, and we also got to see the perspective from his wife, which I really, really, really liked. But I was really disappointed that we didn't get to see her final perspective. I don't want to, and this I can't say too much, I guess, without giving it away, but I just really, really wanted to hear her perspective when they finally got to where they ended up. And I don't know, I just kind of would have appreciated that. So, but I still really enjoyed the book. I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars. So the next book I read was The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. And I read this for the Girly Book Club, which I still have not attended since February. But The Stationery Shop so I shouldn't say that, I guess, that it wasn't good. I enjoyed The Stationery Shop, but it was like another book that really dragged for me. So I don't know, it was like, just seemed like it took forever to get to major plot lines or major points of the story. It's a very, very slow read for me, but I still really enjoyed it. So this story looks at our main character, Roja, and she is from Tehran, and she grows up there in the 1950s and finds like this solace and joy in this bookshop where she meets Bachman, who is also her age, and like this romance starts. And it's this very like whirlwind of a romance, but we know they don't end up together because the book goes back and forth in time to present day, where we see Roja with her husband Walter. So the book goes through how Roja and Bachman don't end up together, and it's like this sad love tragedy essentially of how they don't end up together, and you're like, oh my god, no. But it was very good, and you learn about the political upheaval in Tehran and the consequence from that and the events leading up after that. And then Royha and her sister's eventual move to America to be in college there and their life there. They end up staying there. Obviously, Royha marries Walter. It was just, I don't want to say it was boring. It was definitely interesting. I felt like I learned a lot of stuff. It was fun to hear about, like, when like Roya would cook for Walter when they first met. So they met in college, and one of the first dates is she cooks Tehran food for him, and she like can't find the spices that she needs, and how like American food is so bland, and it really is. We're bland. I'm bland for sure. It's just kind of this like slow moving book where you see her life unfurl and grow. And so she goes to college. She wants to be a chemist and work in the lab, and she graduates, but you know, it's just like terrible timing because it's the 60s and she is a woman and an immigrant, so it's like no one wants to hire her. And so she ends up being like an administrative assistant, a secretary essentially, just kind of like progressing through life with Walter. And I don't know, I liked it. There's a lot of times where I just, like, I was interested. I felt like it was interesting to read. I just wasn't captivated, I guess, during the entire time. So I wish there was just more oomph maybe to it. But I definitely thought that it tackled a lot of issues, a lot of hard-hitting issues that I think literary books are really good for tackling, and I thought that was really good, and I loved those parts of the book. Okay, so the next book I read was The Vanishing Half by Brett Bennett, which everyone and their mom has read on BookTube, but here I am, let's go, finally read it. I loved it. It's worth all the hype, every single hype it's worth. I read it in one day. And I read it on my couch for the entire day. Obviously, I've said that already. And Chandler kept coming out here and bugging me. And I was legitimately getting upset. And he was like, are you mad at me right now? And I'm like, yes, I am actually mad because I want to read this book. It was just so good. So I think, I don't know, a lot of people probably already know the synopsis of this book, but it's about two sisters who are both black but white passing, and eventually they leave their town, and their town is actually this, like, it's not like a formal town, but it's this town set up by this group of people who are all like very light-skinned, essentially could be maybe white passing. They end up leaving this town when they're like 15 or 16 and go to New Orleans to start a new life. The sisters end up getting separated, and one of the sisters goes on to live her life as a white person, and the other one continues to live as a black woman in America and gets married to somebody who is much darker than she is and has a child. The book spans the length of time. I think it starts... Okay, so it starts in like the 1950s to the 1990s, and we follow these two sisters from their beginnings and then to, like, not their ends, but to, like, present day for them. But we also not only get to follow them, but we get to follow their two daughters who also are in this life and navigating it as well. And it's just fascinating to see this intergenerational story woven throughout time and eventually brought together. And it was just really, really, really just so well done, so fascinating, so good. I read Brett Bennett's The Mothers, equally as great, just so good. This was just very well done. There's so many complexities in the characters, and there were so many surprises, I felt like, in characters that I wasn't expecting to be added, but they were added, and they were great and amazing, and really, like, just amazing character development, which I love throughout the story, and really, really helped build this scene and this world and this life, and it was really good. I recommend. The next book I read, wow, this is a lot. This is why maybe I shouldn't read as many books, because this is taking a long time, was The Henna Artist by ALKA Jose. So I was really excited about The Henna Artist. I was. I didn't like it, really. I didn't really like it at all. I thought, so The Henna Artist follows this woman who was married at like 13, and she escapes her abusive marriage and makes it to this major city and becomes a very successful henna artist and can support herself financially. She's buying a house. She has a lot of wealthy clients, a lot of connections. But we find out that she actually has a sister who is also like 13, was born almost right after she left, and she had no idea about her. But her sister, who is an orphan since both their parents die in their village, and she seeks out a way to find her sister and does find her, and now they're both living together in the city. I thought the story was interesting and fun to read at times, but the character development, I guess, in the story kind of confused me. It was really cool to see this woman, the henna artist, you know, supporting herself and, you know, knowing how to work the system and how to, you know, hustle, essentially. It was kind of, I didn't really enjoy, like, her sister's character very much at all. And her sister comes and she's 13. She's very young. You know, she's looking for this sister. She wants this family. All understandable in a 13-year-old girl. And she follows, you know, her sister around on these client visits for henna. But then her sister just turns into this, like, brat, essentially. Like, you know, she secures this appointment to do henna for the royal family, and she tells her sister that she can't come because, you know, her sister has a history of, like, not acting appropriately around her clients, and it's just a very high risk. And she just wants to bring as little people as possible anyways. It's not like she wants to hold this thing back from her sister. And her sister just, essentially, there's a switch, and all of a sudden she just, like, hates her, which I just felt like was very dramatic, even for a teenager, a 13-year-old. So that was kind of weird to get through. I don't want to give too much away, so I just read the summary again, because I felt like a lot of the stuff happens, and I just don't understand that it's outside the realm of this summary. So, I mean, some things happen with her sister, and our main character has to make some really tough choices, which I wouldn't wish on anybody. But it's almost so, like, I think that the choice that had to be made was pretty obvious, given the current climate and time. And I understand how this 13-year-old girl would not agree and could not see that. But it's very frustrating to read sometimes. I also felt like there was, I will say this, it's not, I think it's kind of a spoiler, but not really. So our henna artist also does things on the side. She's very good with mixing plants and medicines and herbals, and she helps women perform abortions as well. She has, like, this concoction or medicine that she can give women, and they have to at least be, you know, cannot be more than 5 months along, I guess, to take this. And she also does this for, you know, numerous women around her community. It's super looked down upon. When her sister finds out, she's super devastated. I kind of didn't really like that part. I think that that was a really important role, and the book does say, like, she used to do medicine with her mother-in-law, and, like, women turn to this option when they have nowhere else to go and they don't have any other choice. So it's not like this merciless, loveless act. It's just something that has to be done, and, you know, the circumstances just aren't awesome. I don't know, so I felt like it was kind of acknowledged in that way, but also, like, just super looked down upon by a lot of the characters, and just didn't like that vibe. But I don't know, there's just a lot of weird stuff in this book. Maybe I can do another review and really get in depth about it, but I just didn't really super enjoy it, so I don't really care to. But I don't know, it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Okay, 2 more books. When No One Was Watching by Alyssa Cole is the next book I read, and I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this was great. The last 2 books I read were thrillers, and I really wanted to get them done at the end of October for Halloween. Yada, yada, yada. I like this book a lot. It was about a girl named Sydney. She lives in Brooklyn, and her neighborhood is getting, like, going through a lot of gentrification. And she goes on this tour of her neighborhood that's led by, like, a white woman. It's full of white people on this tour, and all they're talking about is white people from Brooklyn. And she keeps, like, interrupting the tour and, like, is telling them about the people who live in the houses, like, their history, the Black history of this neighborhood. And, you know, the tour guide is like, you know, why don't you start your own tour? Get out of here. And then she's like, maybe I will. And she does. So the whole book is, like, her trying to start this tour, but then, like, while she's doing that, there's, like, these weird things happening to her neighbors. Like, they keep disappearing. No one, like, there's always like, oh, you know, Jeffrey went to go see his daughter, but like, it's like, oh, well, I don't think Jeffrey would leave right now. It was just like very weird circumstances going on. She befriends kind of her neighbor who is like in a relationship but not, and so him and Sydney kind of start a relationship. That was my favorite part of the book. It happened. Sydney is like trying to set up this tour. She's learning more history about her neighborhood. She's learning more about like this company that's coming in, that's pushing for this gentrification essentially, and pushing more white families into this neighborhood. We find out some really crazy, nasty stuff. But the end of the book is nuts. It's crazy. I was gripping my book in shock, like yelling and like gasping at the book. I could not stop reading it, so I was reading in bed, and like Chandler would be like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "This is just really a lot and scary." And he was like, "Okay." So just a lot of stuff happening. I know there's a lot of like reviews and like even on the book, I think it says like it's very similar to like, it's like very Get Out-esque, and it is, and it's very, very crazy. I think obviously the most unfortunate thing is like gentrification is very real. This happens in neighborhoods throughout the United States a lot. It was like, you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe this is happening. But it's like, this is real. This happens every day to people. People get pushed out of their homes because it becomes more desirable for other people to live there, white people. So I don't know. It's just heartbreaking to know that as I was reading the story, like just having that in the back of your mind. So that was kind of a bummer, but it was definitely a thriller, say that for sure. So the last book I read was The Cutting Season by Attica Locke, and I actually got this book from, like, I found this book through another booktuber, and I'll link her below. I really like this book. This was another like book that kind of moved a little slow for me, but it was another thriller, and we have our main character, Karen. We have our main character, Karen, who is not a Karen. She is a black woman. And she and her daughter live on this plantation where it's like a historic museum, and like she's like essentially this like manager of the plantation. Like they have events there, so people get married there, which is very weird to me. I don't know why you'd want to get married on a plantation, but I'm not a southern white lady, so I don't know. Seems weird to me, but okay. So she like coordinates these events. There's like other events they do plays. Like it's like educational as well. Like they do plays on what happened at the plantation. A lot of like schools go there to tour it. So she's in charge of all of that. There's like a line of cabins on the plantation that were the slave cabins, and one of the cabins is like supposed to be haunted and is like no one ever wants to go in it, and it's Jason's cabin. And apparently, according to like folklore and her family history, her and Jason are like relatives. Like that's her distant relative. Jason was supposedly murdered on the plantation, but no one really knows what happened to him. He just one day left, and he left after slavery was ended. So it's like no one really knows where he went. No one knows what happened to him. It's a mystery. So we have that going on in the background. So we also have Karen, who's a single mom. She has her kid. She's going to school. She's doing life. She's not divorced, but her and her ex-boyfriend were gonna get married, and then it just didn't work out. And he is also now getting married, and so her daughter's like getting pretty jazzed for this wedding, and she's like going through her own stuff with that. So got that going on for Karen, and then a body turns up on the plantation. So there's these cane workers that work near the plantation where they have like sugar cane that gets cut, and a lot of Hispanic immigrants come, and they work these sugar canes. We find this woman on the plantation, not near the fields, and she is murdered, and the book goes through and tries to figure out what happened to her and what's going on with that sugarcane field, what's going on in the plantation. There's a lot of like whodunit, what's going on, a lot of like, is this person, and then like we deep dive into like maybe it's this person, but then it's not, and we go deep dive into somebody else. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's like really scary. It's like I guess I don't know that's scary, but it's like this like slow burn. So it moves slow, which I didn't super enjoy, but I also kind of enjoyed it because I think that was part of like the scariness, I guess, because you're anticipating and you're just like, what is going on? And as we get closer and closer and closer to the end, You know, we see Karen figuring out some stuff, putting some pieces together, and, you know, taking charge, essentially. She solves this murder. We don't need no police. Karen does her thing. I thought this book was really good. I thought it was a very interesting look at a plantation. We have the characters in the book who are mostly Black, who work on this plantation, who are like the actors of the plays, with the cooks, and, you know, Karen herself, who value this plantation and value its history, which is interesting to hear, because, like, part of me almost would just be like, I feel like this would just be, like, a terrible place to be. I feel like it would be a terrible, terrible place to go to see, but a lot of the characters in the book talked about how important it was to preserve their history and show people what it was like. Which is, I can agree with as well. So you have a lot of that happening with the plantation, and then you also have this, like, fucking crazy murder. And the interesting story of, the Hispanic, like, workforce in America. And then, how, like, these things all combined give you this, like, interesting world. I don't know. Definitely on the edge of my seat. I kept thinking I knew who was the killer, and I got it wrong. So that was cool, because I don't really like when I can, like, guess the thriller, because I think, you know, the thriller should keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering the entire time, and this book does that. So I enjoyed it. It was definitely a good one for Halloween time, spooky. It was good. I liked it a lot. Okay, so this is my very long. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about today, or if you're thinking about reading any of them. And let me know what you're reading right now. And as always, like this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.